r/AskReddit by Redditors. Redditors who have eaten at one of the places in Gordon Ramsays Kitchen Nightmares before or after he visited. How was it? I went to Amy's Baking Company in Scottsdale. It was the restaurant in the episode with the crazy Karen. I think it was the only restaurant the show featured where Gordon just walked off because they were too difficult to deal with. I went to check it out after the show had aired because why not? Food was unmemorable. The place was dead. My friend and I were the only patrons in there. The husband owner was our server. He was perfectly pleasant. Didn't ever go back, and it's closed now. Park's Edge in Atlanta was in season 5 episode 12 of Kitchen Nightmares. The place was about 3 blocks from me. They operated in my neighborhood for a couple of years before Gordon visited. They did so without a liquor license, yet offered bottomless mimosas. They were combative to residential neighbors who lived within feet of the location. They bounced checks that were meant to be donations to the neighborhood and never paid. Food was not great. The whole neighborhood figured out not to go there pretty quickly, but offers like their illegal bottomless mimosas brought people from all over and they managed to stay afloat. Barely. Gordon pointed out a ton of stuff in the episode but barely scratched the surface on addressing all the things they had done wrong. That episode was definitely not fake and Gordon's crew probably left a ton of additional stupidity from the owners on the cutting room floor just to get the time to fit. They never got any better after Gordon left and ignored his advice. The neighborhood had watch parties when the episode aired to laugh at how ridiculous the restaurant was, because we'd all experienced it firsthand. Park's Edge then proceeded to get a 44 out of 100 health score shortly after the episode and close permanently sometime after. An amazing and fun spot went into its place about a year later that everyone loves, is still there, and is a smashing success. I go there often. I used to treat myself occasionally to Zacalo, a Mexican restaurant in Philadelphia. The food was vastly better before Gordon changed the menu. Their entire problem was location. On the fringe of 2 universities, but not the kind of place students would go. Staff and faculty loved it but it was too far away for the usual lunch period. So people would go to the vastly inferior Mexican place in the center of campus, even though the service and food were terrible and would take as long or longer to finish as it would have to walk to Zacalo. If you watch the episode, you could tell Gordon had a difficult time coming up with problems. The kitchen was old but clean. The food was great. The owner chef was more than willing to accept any suggestions Gordon had. The restaurant was inviting, and the staff was friendly. They were really doing it all right. I really didn't like the way the owner's wife was portrayed in the episode. She was a lovely, friendly woman who liked to make sure her customers felt welcome and were happy. I really miss that place and I hope the owners and staff are doing well today. I used to frequent a spot featured on Restaurant Impossible. The episode didn't address a real issue, the family's struggle with drugs and stolen money. It was torn down a couple years later and is now a pregnancy center. My mom and I used to go to a place called El Greco in Austin, Texas. They served mid-Greek food. We heard about the Kitchen Nightmares episode, saw that Chef Mike, a microwave, made all the food, and we stopped going. They're closed now so I doubt Ramsay made an impact. I went to a place in Nottingham, UK, where during Kitchen Nightmares he'd implemented a pie night. Genuinely don't remember the name of the restaurant now. Didn't go on pie night, but the venison tartar I had as a starter is still one of the best things I've ever tasted, and I compare every starter since to it. It's been 9 years. I ate at Mama Cherry's Soul Shack in Brighton in the UK, quite a few times actually. The food was always great. It was well cooked, full of flavor and generous portions for what you paid. I have a friend who worked with Ramsay and Marco Pierre White. He said Pierre White was demanding but fair and very generous to his staff, whereas Ramsay could actually be quite nice 1 minute but an utter freaking bell end the next. I ate at J. Willie's in South Bend, Indiana after Gordon visited. The menu was pretty good and the staff and service was friendly but the actual food was largely crappy. The issues weren't because of Gordon, it was the preparation. It seemed like everything had been under a warmer and microwaved as opposed to freshly made. The potato skins were dried out and barbecue sauce was meh. With a little more effort in the kitchen, the place could have made it. It had solid decor and had a few cool historical items from Notre Dame football on the walls. But I think the biggest obstacle was the fact they couldn't keep up with Famous Dave's, which was not too far away and made or makes better food. In retrospect, it was a bit of a red flag that it was empty on a Notre Dame football weekend and we were seated almost immediately. It wasn't too long after my visit that it shut down. I didn't know it was on Kitchen Nightmares until I looked at the wall on the way out and saw his photo with the staff. I worked at Jack's Waterfront in St. Clair Shores, Michigan. The place was a dump when he got there, became a dump after he left, and has been a turn and burn for the owner for decades. Can't remember the bum's name, but he's an ass and a terrible business owner. It's a shame, because it's the perfect on the water location in the area, known as the Nautical Mile. Hey, I worked at Jack's, too. This was about 20 years ago though, so it was run by different owners than those featured in the actual episode. Place was alright, nothing too bad and nothing really exceptional other than the location and that table and the boat stuck in the building. That was always a pain in the ass to service. He came to a restaurant in my neighborhood in Philadelphia, the Hot Potato Cafe. It was unremarkable before and unmemorable after, and closed not too long after his visit. I want to say that it appeared in one of the earlier seasons but can't say for sure. As they were introducing the neighborhood, you can actually see my house in one of the shots. Mine's a Robert Irvine restaurant, Impossible Restaurant. It was called Cave-In, just a few miles outside of Disney World in Winter Garden, Florida. The restaurant was themed to caveman times and served barbecue, big ribs, stegosaurus shreds, pulled pork, that kind of stuff. It was oddly themed to the inside of a cave and had some weird artifacts like props used in the Flintstones movie. Robert Irvine came in and redid the menu, as they didn't seem to have a good handle on how much it cost to make their items and how to price them. They redid the inside of the restaurant to eliminate some of the theming, because in Orlando if you're going to open a theme restaurant you either go all the way or don't bother. They reopened, and within a few months we went back and noted that some of the items that Robert had removed from the menu were back. They tried having trivia nights and karaoke. The place just couldn't decide what it was, and shortly thereafter it closed. Before he came to my town there was a restaurant, Levantis. Every Christmas season my family and I would go there, and I thought the food tasted fine. I was 11, so that could be a reason why. It was Italian food, and for some reason was changed to a burger place when he finished up with the place. It was cool for a while because my town was so small and out of the way, but eventually they sold the place. In my opinion this was because of the location of the place, it being on the end of town rather than in the middle, and Italian food was being dominated by another restaurant down the street. I guess the owners didn't like making burgers either. It was cool to have a television crew on my main street though. I ate at Marmarita's when it was new. One of the cooks that you can see on the show is a friend of mine. We worked together for a decade and the main cook is his wife. The food wasn't terrible but it definitely wasn't good. Plus the shopping center it was in is buried deep in Newbury Park and kind of a chore to get there. I left thinking I never need to come here again. There are too many good Mexican places close to my house. A place I grew up eating at, due to lack of other options in now Erisville, Michigan, was on Restaurant Impossible. The food was always pretty average to mediocre, but it was one of the few options at the time. I think a lot of stuff was microwaved. The interior had a specific decor theme which didn't age well. It was always dark and dusty. After the show came through, there was an immediate difference in the food and decor. Everything was a little bit better. However, I think they quickly reverted back to their old microwave ways and the restaurant eventually closed. Finally, a post for me. There's a pizza place right by my apartment that was on Kitchen Nightmares. I've only eaten there after the appearance, but it's some of the best pizza I've ever had. The owner says Ramsay was an asshole and tried to get his pizza crust recipe. English is not his first language, and after watching the episode, I did kinda feel like Ramsay was walking all over him and he wasn't really able to stick up for himself. Then again, I do get a sense of stubbornness from the pizzeria owner as well. Pantaleon's is a restaurant in Denver that Ramsay had on his show. The owner, Pete, is Sicilian and a huge character. He goes on and on about how Ramsay is a moron, and even though he gave him a brand new stove, he got a surprise $5,000 tax bill the next year. He says his proudest moment is when the chef asked him for his pizza dough recipe and he got to tell him F no. The food at the restaurant is amazing. Authentic Sicilian cuisine that is absolutely delicious. Chappie's in Nashville. During and after, and also was involved in changes construction done as part of the show. Nasty lol. After Ramsay's visit, Osana in the New Orleans French Quarter. Very mediocre considering the overall quality of New Orleans food. Yes. The Greek at the harbor in Ventura, California. This would have been about 2002, so before the show. My immediate impressions were of a stale, musty restaurant on its last legs. The carpet was stained beyond redemption. There was a disused buffet line, and in general it was pretty clear the only reason the place survived was its location on the waterfront. We ordered our food without incident. It was mediocre, nothing horrible, just so-so. Then the real weirdness began. The lights dimmed a touch, and loud thumping, jangly music started blaring. Out came prancing this hefty middle-aged woman dressed like a movie version of a gypsy with a gyrating bulbous gut. She weaved her way between the tables, with a wry smile on her face, like her pride as a belly dancer was directly correlated to how uncomfortable she could make the diners. I was there with my fiancé and sister, and frankly speaking I didn't know where to look or what to do when she arrived at my table with her belly rolls rippling against my hair. Luckily, my bat's crazy sister also fancied herself a gypsy belly dancer, and saw her opportunity to share some of the spotlight. She sprang from her seat, pranced over to my side of the table, and if one belly dancer in your face wasn't enough, well, how about two with one of them your older sister? My sister grabbed one of the handkerchiefs that the dancer was waving around, and then together they weaved their way through all of the tables, giving each man a good look at their belly buttons, though I doubt anyone else was as taken aback as I was at the whole affair. I found the room very hot and pressing, like the walls were closer than they had seemed when we first came in and sat down. I glanced at my fiancé with the impulse to apologize, but I couldn't articulate much but a blubber over my glass of water. Finally, the music stopped and the dancer made a dramatic, flourishing exit through some musty curtains. My sister came gliding back to the table with a look of triumph. For the rest of the night, I chose not to speak about any of it or look at anyone else in the eye. When I saw the episode of Kitchen Nightmares years later, I fell out of my chair. As awkward as that was for Gordon, at least he didn't have his sister leaping out of her chair and dialing that awkwardness up to 11. What the hell did I just read? Was this the one where Ramsay locked himself in the freezer and set fire to himself to escape the belly dancing? I don't care if this is true or not because it is amazing. Friend of my wife owned one in New England. Food was good. It was a local place that served local food. New England fish and chips, friend clams chowder, etc. The locals loved it. Him and his crew came in and tried to turn it into a chick seafood place. Doors were closed for good a few weeks later. You have to know your audience, and the producers and staff of that show didn't, nor did they care. They are making TV, not restaurants. If it closed a few weeks later, things were pretty dire financially. Restaurants don't tank overnight. That's all folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening.